Hi there, this is Math 145, Section 2.3, and this is a pretty interesting section. It deals with how to manipulate your data displays so that you basically lie to people. Now, hopefully that's not how you're going to use it, but more importantly, it also tells us as consumers of data how to look out for these misleading or deceptive practices that are often used on us. So it's pretty interesting. I love this quote by the British Prime Minister. Oh my gosh, so many years ago. There are three kinds of lies: lies, damn lies, and statistics. Oh yeah, baby. The book does talk about misleading versus deceptive graphs, so look at that a little bit. The first one we have to talk about is three-dimensional charts and graphs. So go ahead and just kind of read that over so that you kind of have an idea of what that's saying. And then, pause me down as always and start me back up. Okay, so you'll notice what they're doing there is comparing a flat pie chart with a 3D pie chart. And the idea being that it's kind of hard to read that 3D stuff. Sometimes we'll make some display 3D because, our software can do it now and it looks so fancy. But in fact, all we're doing is making it harder to read. So they surveyed people about how much time they spend per week studying. And I want you to compare the green group here that spent 1 to 5 hours. Notice I'm getting that from the key there. There is the green, labeled by green in case you're looking at this in black and white. And here's the green over there in the 3D graph. And compare that to the red group, or the people who spent 21 to 25 hours studying. Again, that's there. And there's the red group on the 3D graph. And simply put, it's just a whole lot easier to read the non-3D graph on the right. It's just simply a better graph. Yeah, it's not 3D. It doesn't look like it, made it into the 21st century. But that's okay because it's easier to read. In fact, the book goes so far as to use the word never. Never use three-dimensional graphics. They're in there. You'll find them in Excel. You'll find them in Word. But please, don't use them. They're just deceptive, or rather I should say misleading to our eyes. So keep that in mind. This was a concept we talked about actually in the data displays worksheet that we saw in 2.2. And so we're just seeing it here again. We're talking about adjusting the scale of graphs to manipulate the data. And so read over that number 1, understand the data, and then ask yourself, how would you describe this data? Pause me down, we'll talk about that. And then we're going to go on together with the rest of this page. So again, we're not looking at the graphs yet, but look at the data up here. Think to yourself, what is going on with the data? As you go, you'll notice that these are each decade increases. And then what's happening to the life expectancy? I personally saw that life expectancy was increasing steadily over the years. But now, let's look at some graphs. I want you to look at those two graphs and then answer that question. Pause me down and then come back and we'll see what we want to say together. So when I look at graph number 1, I feel invincible. I am going to live forever. My God, look at that. We'll be 120 before long. This is an enormous increase. I am going to start living dangerously because obviously our life expectancy can take it. But when I look at the right one there, I start to think, yeah, that's an increase, definitely. That's definitely an increase. But not so much, right? Slow and steady. Do they make you feel different? They should. They're supposed to. And you got to be aware of that. When someone presents data to you, oftentimes in graph form, right? Are they manipulating the scale of the graph to further their point or their agenda? We have to be careful consumers of data and always think about that when we are given data. Okay, now pictographs use pictures to make the graphics look fancier, and they can be used well and they can be used not well. Let's look at number 2 here, a good example of not so good. So read that over and see what you would answer. Pause me down and then check back with me. So my answer was, at first glance, what fruit was collected the most automatically. I said, oh, bananas, hands down. It was clearly the most fruit. But then when I look closely, it actually looks like there's 1, 2, 3, 4 bananas, 1, 2, 3, 4 apples, and oh, look at that, 4 cherries as well, right? So was I right? No, probably not. Looks like they were all, all 4. How could we fix this? I think that's a pretty simple fix. If we simply scaled the fruits so that they were all the same size, that bananas weren't enormous compared to the cherries, that would certainly help, wouldn't it? And you'd get a more accurate pictograph. Like I say, pictographs aren't always bad, but they're easy to draw incorrectly. And that is actually something that happens down here on number 3. So go ahead and read over number 3. Look at this example here. Purchasing power is defined there in that thought bubble. And pause me down, see what you think. So this number 3 here is kind of an example of something that might happen pretty innocently. So again, the idea is that in 1980, 1 Canadian dollar had the same purchasing power as 1 US dollar. But in 1995, 1 Canadian dollar had the same purchasing power as 50 cents US. And so the question is, does it really look like that for our minds? The area of the coins tell a bit of a different story. And again, this is kind of an innocent mistake, maybe, probably. And here's what happened. The person they started off with this large of a coin, right? And then in order to make the 50-cent comparison, they reduced the height of that coin by half. And you got down here, right? But of course, it's a coin, so it would look weird if you just reduced that part of it. So they also used half the width, didn't they? And what that ended up doing is reducing the whole area. The whole area gets reduced by half times a half, and it's actually 1/4. Actually, it's reduced to 1/4. So look at again the coin for 1995 and compare that visually with the coin from 1980. You'll actually agree, hopefully, that the areas of those coins are different by a factor of 4, not just a half like the numbers would indicate. On the next page, I've got my own drawing of a pictograph that does not suffer that fate. So as again, my point here is that pictographs can work, right? If you carefully construct them, they can make a pretty good display. Here's a pictograph that I made pretty easily. And you'll notice all I did was I only reduced the length of each dollar bill. I kept the widths the same, didn't I? And so I was able to show that 50% reduction easily enough. So it is possible to make pictograms that are not flawed. So keep that in mind. And now I have guidelines for constructing good graphics down here. Lots of good stuff. Read them over, but I'll just kind of summarize them really quickly. Title and label always include units. Of course, don't lie. Hey, dummy, don't lie. That makes sense. So minimize your white space so that they're readable. Avoid clutter, though, unnecessary backgrounds or pictures. The USA Today always gives me these crazy graphics with these crazy backgrounds, and I always think, ugh, why'd you do that? Well, you're a paper and you're trying to get attention. I get that, but still not what you want to do in normal statistics. We go on to say avoid 3 dimensions. Again, don't do it. Just don't do it. My husband would appreciate this one here. Do not use more than one design in the same graphic. He would tell you as a visual designer that is just cluttered and messy and just does not add to your message, he would tell us. And lastly, you see this one a lot, you want to avoid relative graphs that are devoid of data or scales. You know, something like, look at our increase. Look at that. And there's no numbers down here. There's no nothing. So obviously don't do that. And more importantly, as consumers of data, look for these things. These are some of the ways people lie to us, and we cannot let them get away with that. There's a couple worksheets down there, pretty interesting worksheets that I've written over the years. Right now they're optional, but you know, if you do one and you want to ask me questions, I would love to answer them. So email me and we will talk.